Mara Solen was 24 years old, and she had never once in her life felt like she belonged anywhere. She lived in a small house at the edge of Veresti, a village tucked against the mountains in rural Romania, where the winters came early and the people held on to their old beliefs like stones in a closed fist. The house had been her grandmother's. The walls were thin, the floorboards creaked in 3 different places, and the garden grew herbs that no one in the village would buy from her. But it was hers, and that was more than most things in her life had ever been. The village had made up its mind about Mara before she could even speak. She was born on a night when a storm split the oldest oak in Veresti straight down the middle. Her mother did not survive the birth. Her father was gone before sunrise the next morning, and no one ever heard from him again. By the time Mara could walk, the whispers had already begun. By the time she started school, the whispers had become something louder, something permanent. The village called her cursed. She heard it so many times over the years that the word stopped stinging. It became background noise, like the wind through the mountain trees or the creak of her old floorboards. She learned to carry it the way you carry a stone in your shoe, always there, always slightly painful, but something you stop noticing after a while. She kept mostly to herself. She tended her herbs, she kept a journal, she read books borrowed from a small library 3 villages over. She did not have friends. She did not have enemies. She simply existed, quietly and carefully, in a space that everyone else had decided belonged at the edge of things. That was how her life looked in late October, when everything changed. It started with a child. Petru was 6 years old, the son of her neighbor, a woman named Elena who had never once said a kind word to Mara, but who also never went out of her way to be cruel. Petru was a curious boy, the kind who asked questions about everything and followed insects across the yard for 20 minutes at a time. He was also, on one particular evening, very small and very alone, somewhere inside the dark forest that bordered Veresti. The village found out at dusk. Elena's screams brought people out of their homes, men gathered with torches. There was a lot of shouting and very little organization. Nobody knocked on Mara's door. Nobody asked her to help. She stood at her window and watched the torches move toward the tree line, and then she put on her coat and followed them. No one stopped her. No one welcomed her either. She simply walked past the group and into the forest ahead of them, because she knew the forest better than anyone in Veresti. She had spent years walking its edges, sitting beneath its trees, listening to the sounds it made when the wind moved through it at different speeds. The forest had never frightened her. She was not sure why. It simply felt, in a way she could never explain, like the one place that did not look at her with suspicion. She called the boy's name as she walked. The torches behind her grew fainter. The trees grew thicker. The cold came down hard, the way mountain cold does, sudden and complete, like a door closing. And then she heard him, a small, frightened sound, somewhere to her left and slightly downhill. She moved toward it carefully, watching the ground beneath her feet. The trees opened into a narrow clearing near the edge of a rocky drop, maybe 15 feet down to a dry riverbed below. Petru was there, sitting on the cold ground, his arms wrapped around his knees, his face wet with tears. But he was not alone. Between the boy and the edge of the drop stood a wolf, unlike anything Mara had ever seen. It was massive. The word massive does not quite cover it. It was the kind of large that makes you rethink everything you thought you understood about size. Its fur was black, the kind of black that absorbs light rather than reflecting it. Its eyes were amber, bright and steady, catching what little moonlight reached through the trees. Its shoulder was level with Mara's chest. She stopped. The wolf was not looking at Petru. It was looking at her. Mara understood, in that moment, 2 things simultaneously. The first was that the wolf was not threatening the child. It was standing between the boy and the drop, keeping him from going any further. The second was that the torches from the village were still far away, their light swallowed by distance and trees, and no one was coming in time to do anything except her. She did not run. Running felt wrong in a way she could not explain, not because she was too frightened to move, but because something deep inside her was completely, unusually calm. She had spent years learning stillness, years being quiet, because the world offered her no invitation to be loud. That stillness, in this moment, did not feel like weakness. It felt like the only right thing. She looked at the wolf. She looked at it steadily, the way you look at something you are trying to understand, rather than something you are trying to escape. And then she spoke. She did not say anything commanding. She did not say anything brave or calculated. She simply said her name, the way you might introduce yourself to a stranger you hoped might become something other than a stranger. "I am Mara," she said. The forest was completely silent. The wolf held her gaze for a long moment. Its amber eyes did not blink. Its breathing was slow and even, small clouds of warmth rising into the cold air. Then, without any sound at all, its front legs folded beneath it, its massive head lowered. It went down not the way an animal crouches before it runs, but the way something very old and very knowing bows before something it has recognized. It knelt. Mara stood still for 3 full seconds, which felt much longer. Then she walked forward, past the wolf, and reached Petru. She picked him up. He wrapped his arms around her neck and pressed his face against her shoulder and cried quietly. She held him and turned back toward the trees. The wolf rose when she moved. It fell into step behind her, not close, but present, its paws silent on the dead leaves. It followed them to the edge of the clearing, then to the first line of older trees, and then it stopped. Mara did not look back. She kept walking, but she felt the moment it stopped moving, the way you feel when someone who has been walking beside you pauses and lets you go on alone. When she stepped out of the forest, the torchlight hit her and Petru at the same time. Elena ran forward and pulled her son out of Mara's arms, clutching him and crying. The men stood around with their torches and looked at Mara in a way she could not quite read. Someone asked what had happened. She said she found him near the rocky drop, that he was cold but not hurt. She said nothing about the wolf. Someone at the back of the group had seen something dark at the tree line. There was murmuring. A woman near Elena said, quietly but not quietly enough, that it was strange, was it not, that the cursed girl had walked in and come out so quickly. Another woman told her to be quiet. The first woman did not look convinced. Mara went home. She made tea and sat at her kitchen table and wrote 6 pages in her journal, describing every detail of what she had seen and felt. Then she closed the journal and sat in the silence of her kitchen for a long time, listening to the wind outside. She did not know what the wolf was. She did not know what it meant, but she knew, with a certainty that sat in her chest like something solid, that it had not been a coincidence. 3 weeks later, a man came to Veresti. He arrived on a cold, gray morning, asking questions. He was not from the village. That much was obvious to everyone immediately. He moved through Veresti the way a person moves when they are looking for something specific and do not intend to leave without it. He asked about the forest. He asked about the night of the storm 3 weeks ago, the one with the wolf. He gave a description of the person he was looking for. A woman, he said, who was not afraid. A woman the forest had recognized. A woman a great wolf had knelt before without a single command. The village pointed him to the edge of town. His name was Caius Dren. He was tall and quietly serious, with the kind of face that looked like it had spent a long time outdoors in difficult weather. He knocked on Mara's door in the early afternoon. She opened it and looked at him without expression, the way she looked at most things she had not yet decided what to do with. He told her why he had come. She listened. When he finished, she told him she did not know what he was talking about. He did not argue. He sat down on her doorstep, leaned his back against the wall, and waited. She let him wait 40 minutes before she opened the door again and handed him a cup of tea. He took it, thanked her, and waited again. She sat across from him on the step and said, "Start from the beginning." He did. Caius explained that he came from a long line of people who had maintained a covenant with the mountain forest, not a metaphor, not a tradition, but an actual living arrangement between his family and something that had existed in those mountains far longer than Veresti had. He explained that every generation, a guardian appeared, a creature of enormous size and ancient age that took the form of a great wolf, and that this guardian was not dangerous unless it became untethered, and it became untethered when it could not find the person it was meant to anchor to. One person, chosen for reasons that were not entirely clear even to him. Someone the guardian recognized across distance and time. Someone it would kneel before, without being asked, as a sign of recognition. Every few decades, Caius said, it chooses someone new. Sometimes it takes years to find them. When it cannot find them, it grows restless. The forest grows restless with it. Mara wrapped her hands around her cup and looked out at the empty road in front of her house. "And you think it chose me," she said. "I know it did," he said. "I have been looking for you for 8 months." She was quiet for a while, then she said, "Everyone in this village thinks I am cursed." Caius looked at her. He did not look at her the way people in Veresti looked at her, with wariness, or with pity, or with the particular kind of discomfort that people feel around things they do not understand. He looked at her with something that felt closer to recognition. The same way, she thought, the wolf's amber eyes had found her in the dark. "They were right," he said. "You were marked. They just did not understand what for." It took Mara a long time to speak again. "Marked," she said finally. "The night you were born," he said. "The storm, the oak. Those were signs, not causes. The tree did not split because you arrived. It split because something very old and very aware recognized that the person it had been waiting for had finally come." Mara thought about her mother, who had not survived that night. She thought about her father, who had run. She thought about the years of whispers and crossed roads, and neighbors who held their children a little closer when she walked by. "None of it was punishment," Caius said, as though he could hear the direction of her thoughts. "None of it was wrong with you. It was all just preparation. Isolation can make you very still, and the guardian responds to stillness, to someone who does not react with fear, who does not fill silence with noise. It has tried to find people before who were not ready. It only kneels once. In my family's records, it has never knelt at all unless it was certain." Mara sat with this for a long time. She was not a person who accepted things easily. She had learned over the years that things given quickly could be taken quickly, and that things which sounded too large were usually too good. But this did not feel like something being given to her. It felt like something being named, something that had always existed, finally getting a word. She told Caius she needed time. He said he understood. He left Veresti that evening, but he left her a way to contact him and told her he would come back whenever she was ready. Over the next 3 days, Mara walked the edge of the forest every morning. She wrote pages and pages in her journal, going back over her whole life and looking at it from a new angle, the way you might turn a stone over to see what is on the underside. She thought about every moment she had been told she was wrong, or dangerous, or too quiet, or too strange. She thought about the wolf's amber eyes, steady and knowing, and the way it had lowered its head without hesitation, as though it had already made its decision and was simply finally able to act on it. On the 3rd morning, she did not stop at the edge. She walked into the forest. The wolf was waiting in a clearing deep among the old trees, standing completely still in a bar of pale winter light. It looked exactly as she remembered, enormous, black, ancient, in a way that had nothing to do with its body. Its amber eyes found her the moment she stepped into the clearing. She walked toward it. She stopped a few feet away and looked at it for a long time. Then, slowly, she went down onto her knees in the cold leaves. The wolf knelt too. They stayed like that for a while, 2 beings in a quiet clearing, the wind moving through the high branches above them, the world going on somewhere outside the trees. Mara did not feel afraid. She did not feel chosen in any grand or glorious sense. She felt, for the first time in her memory, exactly where she was supposed to be. She stayed in the clearing for almost an hour. When she left, the wolf walked with her to the tree line and stopped. She called Caius that afternoon. 7 years have passed since that October. Mara still lives in Veresti, though the house is in better shape now, and the garden grows more than herbs. Caius is somewhere in her life. She has never been the kind of person to define things in simple terms, and neither, it turns out, is he. What they are to each other is something that does not need a name to be real. The village still talks about her. Some still use the old word, but a few of them, especially the ones who were there the night Petru was found, have gone quiet on the subject. Petru himself is 13 now and brings her bread every Sunday morning, always on time, without ever being asked. The wolf has not been seen again in the way it was seen that night, but Mara knows it is there. She has always been good at knowing when something real is close. Real things, she has learned, do not need to announce themselves. She wrote something in her journal the day after she knelt in the clearing. She still reads it sometimes, when the old weight tries to come back. It says, "I spent 24 years believing I was the thing that went wrong. I was just the thing the forest was waiting for.